There's a kind of stillness that sets in during the final moments before a match, a quiet tension that thrums just beneath the surface. For me, it's always been a place of focus, of clarity. But not tonight. As I laced up my cleats in the locker room, the usual buzz of pre-game chatter felt distant, muted. My mind wasn't on the match ahead but on the lingering unease that had crept into my life like a shadow. Sophia. She'd been different lately. Distant. Her laugh didn't feel as warm, her touch not as familiar. I told myself I was imagining things. Marriage has its ebbs and flows, right? But then there were the late-night charity meetings, the phone always turned face down, and the quiet moments where her thoughts seemed miles away. Rivera. Mateo's voice cut through the fog. I looked up to see him grinning. You ready to bury these galaxy clowns? Yeah, I said, forcing a smile. Let's do it. I don't know why I looked toward the VIP box during the game. Maybe part of me hoped Sophia's presence would ease my doubts. Instead, it made them worse. There she was, sitting near the back, her emerald green dress catching the stadium lights. But she wasn't alone. Jordan Hayes. Even from the field, I could see him leaning in close to her, laughing. Sophia smiled back, that kind of soft, genuine smile I hadn't seen in weeks. My stomach twisted. Jordan wasn't just anyone, he played midfield for LA Galaxy, our fiercest rival, and he was the kind of guy who thrived on stirring the pot. Focus, Lucas. I shook the thought from my head and got back in position. The match was a blur after that, fueled by adrenaline and frustration. In the 77th minute, I scored. The crowd roared, but I barely heard it. My eyes went straight to the VIP box, locking on Sophia. She clapped politely, her expression unreadable. Back in the locker room after the match, the team was celebrating, but I stayed quiet. When I finally left the stadium, I headed straight home, my mind racing with questions I wasn't ready to ask. The house was dark when I got home, the faint hum of the refrigerator the only sound breaking the silence. Sophia's car was in the driveway, but the house felt empty. I kicked off my shoes by the door and dropped my bag in the corner. She was in the living room, curled up on the couch with a glass of wine in one hand and her phone in the other. The soft glow of the screen lit up her face, her expression relaxed. For a moment, I hesitated. She looked beautiful, the way she always did, but something about the scene felt off. Too casual, too calm. Hey, I said, walking into the room. She looked up, startled, but quickly recovered. Hey, love. You're home early. Shouldn't you be out celebrating that goal? I shrugged, leaning against the doorway. Not really in the mood for a party tonight. She set her phone down, face down as usual. You okay? I wanted to say no, to ask her why she seemed so distant lately, to ask her why she'd been laughing with Jordan Hayes in the VIP box. But instead, I just said, yeah, just tired. She smiled faintly, her eyes searching mine. You were great tonight, by the way. That goal was beautiful. Thanks, I said, trying to gauge her sincerity. For a moment, I considered bringing it up, Jordan, the way she'd been acting, the gnawing feeling that something wasn't right. But I stopped myself. Without proof, it would just sound like jealousy, insecurity. You doing anything tomorrow? I asked instead. She tilted her head. Just the usual stuff. Why? I thought we could spend the day together. Maybe take a drive or something. She hesitated, just for a second, before saying, that sounds nice. But her tone didn't match the words, and I noticed the way her hand inched toward her phone, like she was already thinking about whatever message she'd just received. That night, as Sophia slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling. Every instinct I had, every gut feeling I'd ever relied on, was screaming at me. Something was wrong. The next morning, Sophia was already gone when I woke up. A note sat on the kitchen counter, written in her tidy, looping handwriting. Had to leave early for a meeting. I'll see you tonight. Love you. I stared at the note, the words love you feeling hollow. Grabbing my coffee, I leaned against the counter and scrolled through my phone. My mind wasn't on social media or emails, though. It was on her. That gut feeling from the night before gnawed at me. Sophia had always been busy, her work with the foundation kept her calendar packed, but something about these meetings felt off. Too frequent. Too conveniently timed. I couldn't shake the memory of Jordan Hayes leaning in close to her at the match. The way she laughed at whatever he said, like she was sharing some private joke. Before I could stop myself, I grabbed my keys and headed out the door. I parked down the street from the foundation's office, the engine idling as I debated what I was doing. I wasn't the kind of guy to spy on my wife. But then again, I never thought I'd have a reason to. After a few minutes, I saw her. Sophia walked out of the building, her hair shining in the morning sun, a light scarf draped over her shoulders. She looked perfect, as always. Jordan Hayes stepped out behind her, wearing sunglasses and a confident smirk. He placed a hand on her back, and she didn't move away. My heart slammed against my ribcage as I watched them walk to a nearby cafe. They sat at an outdoor table, leaning in close as they talked. I clenched the steering wheel, my knuckles white. This wasn't a work meeting. This wasn't innocent. When they finally stood to leave, Jordan brushed his hand against hers. She laughed softly, glancing around before pulling her hand away. I stayed in my car, watching as Sophia got into her car and drove off. Jordan went the other direction. My mind raced. The doubt that had been gnawing at me for weeks wasn't doubt anymore. I spent the rest of the day trying to act normal. I went to practice, passed the ball, laughed at my teammates' jokes, and even managed to finish a few drills without spacing out. But beneath it all, my thoughts were elsewhere, circling the same question over and over: what now? When I got home, Sophia was in the kitchen chopping vegetables, the scent of garlic and herbs filling the air. She smiled when she saw me, her knife pausing mid-cut. "Hey, babe. How was practice?" "Good," I said, forcing a smile. "What's for dinner?" "Chicken marsala," she replied, turning back to the cutting board. "Your favorite." I wanted to confront her right then, to ask her where she'd really been this morning, why she was with Jordan, what they'd talked about. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned against the counter, watching her move with the same grace and ease I'd fallen in love with years ago. She looked up after a moment, her brow furrowing. "What?" "Nothing," I said quickly. "Just thinking about the match next week." "Ah, the rematch with Galaxy," she said, her tone light. "You're going to crush them, I know it." Her words should have reassured me, but they didn't. Not when I could still see the image of her laughing with Jordan in that cafe. As we ate dinner, I decided to probe, careful not to raise suspicion. "So, how was your day?" Sophia shrugged, taking a sip of wine. "Busy as always. Meetings, planning for the gala next month. You know how it is." "Anyone interesting stop by the office?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. She didn't miss a beat. "Nope. Just the usual board members." Her lie landed like a punch to the gut, but I kept my expression neutral. After dinner, as Sophia cleaned up, I slipped into the bedroom and grabbed her phone from the nightstand. My hands shook as I unlocked it. It wasn't the first time I'd felt the urge to look, but it was the first time I actually did. There were no obvious signs. No texts from Jordan, no emails that raised red flags. But then I checked her location history. The cafe from this morning popped up, its address timestamped with the exact moment I'd watched her sitting with Jordan. I put the phone back where I'd found it and stared at the wall. My suspicions were no longer suspicions. They were facts. I didn't sleep much that night. The weight of what I'd uncovered pressed down on me like a ton of bricks. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, Sophia and Jordan, sitting too close, laughing like there was no one else in the world. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. Sophia had already left for another meeting, and I couldn't stomach the thought of going through another day pretending everything was fine. Instead, I made a call. Paul Richards, the voice on the other end answered. "Mr. Richards, this is Lucas Rivera. I need your help." Paul was a private investigator I'd heard about through a teammate. I'd never thought I'd need his services, but desperation had a way of changing things. I met Paul in a quiet coffee shop across town. He was an older man, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense. After I explained the situation, he leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "So you think your wife is cheating on you with Jordan Hayes?" "I know she is," I said, my voice hard. "I just need proof." Paul nodded slowly. "I'll take the case. But I'll be honest with you, this could get messy." "It's already messy," I said. We discussed the details, surveillance, tracking her movements, and monitoring any communication between Sophia and Jordan. It felt invasive, wrong even, but I needed answers. 2 days later, Paul called me with an update. "I followed her this afternoon," he said. "She met Jordan at a hotel downtown. They stayed for 2 hours before leaving separately." My chest tightened. Hearing it out loud made it feel even more real. "There's more," Paul continued. "I checked her financials. She's been making regular payments to a joint account with Hayes. The account was opened about 6 months ago." I clenched my fists, anger boiling under the surface. She wasn't just seeing him, she was building a life with him, right under my nose. "Keep digging," I said. That night, I sat on the couch, staring at the evidence Paul had sent me, grainy photos of Sophia and Jordan walking into the hotel, laughing as they left. It was everything I needed to confirm what I already knew, but instead of clarity, I felt a storm brewing inside me. I couldn't just let this go. The next morning, I sat in my car outside the practice facility, the weight of the evidence hanging over me. Paul's updates had given me all the proof I needed, but knowing wasn't enough. Not yet. Mateo knocked on my window, snapping me out of my thoughts. "You good, man? You've been sitting here for 20 minutes. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just making a call. Be right in." As he walked away, I stared at my phone, my finger hovering over Sophia's contact. Part of me wanted to call her, confront her, let the fury I'd been holding in pour out. But something stopped me. If I played this wrong, she'd spin it, make me the bad guy. No. I needed her to feel the same betrayal I was carrying, and I had to make sure she couldn't wriggle her way out of it. That evening, I decided to set a trap. Sophia was in the living room, scrolling through her phone as usual, when I casually mentioned the team's next match against the Galaxy. "I've got some media stuff the day after," I said, pretending to look at my schedule. "But I'll be home late Friday night." Sophia barely looked up. "Sounds like a busy week." I studied her closely, waiting for any sign that she was putting something together in her head. She didn't seem fazed, but I knew better than to trust her calm exterior. The next morning, I left for training as usual, but instead of heading straight to practice, I parked a few blocks away and waited. Sure enough, an hour later, Sophia's car pulled out of the driveway. I followed at a distance, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. She led me to a different hotel this time, smaller but just as private. My heart pounded as I watched her park and walk inside. 15 minutes later, Jordan's car pulled up, and he strode in like he owned the place. I didn't need to go in. I'd seen enough. I sat in my car, the engine still running, as a wave of emotions crashed over me, anger, betrayal, and a searing determination. They thought they could do this behind my back, thought I'd never find out. They were wrong. That night, Sophia seemed completely at ease when I got home, as if nothing had happened. She greeted me with a warm smile and asked how practice went. The sight of her acting so normal, so comfortable in her lies, made my blood boil. I played along, though. I smiled, kissed her on the cheek, and answered her questions. If she suspected anything, she didn't show it. After dinner, while she was in the shower, I grabbed my laptop and started working on the next step of my plan. I wasn't just going to confront her, I was going to dismantle everything she thought she had with Jordan. The next morning, I met with Paul again. I need a favor, I told him, sliding a small USB drive across the table. What's on it? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Footage from my house, I said. The security system records everything. I want you to send it to Jordan Hayes' management team. Anonymously. Paul hesitated. You sure about this? That could blow up in ways you can't control. I'm counting on it, I replied. Paul nodded, sliding the drive into his pocket. Consider it done. 2 days later, the fallout began. News broke that Jordan Hayes had been accused of having an affair with a married woman. Photos of him entering and leaving hotels with Sophia were plastered across gossip sites and social media. Sophia spent the morning pacing the living room, her phone clutched in her hand as she fielded calls and texts. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee and pretending to read the news on my phone. This is insane, she said, more to herself than to me. It's all lies. Lies? I asked, feigning surprise. What's going on? She froze, her expression shifting to one of panic. Nothing. Just, work stuff. I set my mug down, staring at her. Sophia, are you sure there's nothing you want to tell me? Her face paled. Of course not. Why would you ask that? I let the question hang in the air, watching as the weight of it settled on her shoulders. Sophia avoided me for the rest of the day, retreating into the bedroom with her phone while I pretended to work in the living room. I could hear her muffled voice through the closed door, sharp and urgent. I didn't need to guess who she was talking to. Later that evening, she emerged, looking composed but wary. I think someone's spreading rumors about me, she said, her voice carefully measured. Rumors? I asked, setting my laptop aside. What kind of rumors? She hesitated, clearly trying to decide how much I knew. Just, someone trying to make it look like I've been unfaithful. It's ridiculous. I nodded slowly, leaning back in my chair. That's crazy. Any idea who'd do something like that? She shook her head, her expression tight. No. Probably some jealous board member or something. Her lies were almost impressive. Almost. The next morning, Paul called with another update. You're not gonna believe this, he said. Hayes' team is scrambling to do damage control, but it's not working. His sponsors are pulling out, and the Galaxy are considering suspending him. A grim sense of satisfaction settled over me. Jordan wasn't just losing Sophia, he was losing everything. And Sophia? I asked. She's trying to keep a low profile, but people are starting to connect the dots. It's only a matter of time before the story blows up completely. Good, I said. Keep me posted. When I hung up, I couldn't stop a small smile from forming. This was just the beginning. That evening, I decided it was time to confront Sophia. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, when I walked in and stood in front of her. We need to talk, I said, my voice steady. She looked up, her expression cautious. About what? I held up my phone, the screen displaying one of the photos Paul had sent me. Sophia and Jordan, hand in hand outside the hotel. Her face drained of color. Lucas, I can explain. Don't, I interrupted. Don't lie to me, Sophia. Not anymore. She opened her mouth to speak but stopped, realizing there was no point. The silence between us was deafening. How long? I asked. Tears welled in her eyes. It wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't mean for it to go this far. That's not an answer, I said, my voice rising. How long? 6 months, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The weight of her words hit me like a punch to the gut. 6 months of betrayal. 6 months of lies. I took a step back, shaking my head. I gave you everything, Sophia. Everything. And this is how you repay me. She started to cry, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Not anymore. I didn't sleep that night. After Sophia's confession, she retreated to the guest room, and I stayed in the living room, staring at the ceiling and replaying every moment of our marriage in my mind. All the little signs I'd ignored, all the excuses I'd believed, it all came rushing back like a flood. By morning, my anger had crystallized into something cold and deliberate. This wasn't just about confronting Sophia anymore. This was about making sure neither she nor Jordan ever forgot the cost of what they'd done. The following week, Inter Miami was set to play the Galaxy again, a high-profile match with national coverage. It was the perfect opportunity for what I had planned. During practice, I kept my head down and focused, even as my teammates joked and speculated about the drama surrounding Jordan Hayes. Mateo pulled me aside at one point, his expression serious. Hey, man, is everything okay? You've been different lately. I'm fine, I said, giving him a reassuring pat on the shoulder. Just focused on the game. Mateo nodded, though I could tell he wasn't convinced. On the day of the match, the stadium was packed. The energy was electric, the rivalry palpable. I could feel the weight of the crowd's anticipation as I took my position on the field, but my mind was elsewhere. In the 75th minute, I scored. It wasn't just any goal, it was a beautiful, clean strike, the kind that made the crowd erupt in cheers. But instead of celebrating with my teammates, I ran straight to the sideline, where a camera crew was stationed. I pulled off my jersey to reveal the shirt I'd hidden underneath. Bold black letters spelled out the message. Jordan Hayes, keep my wife. The stadium fell silent for a moment, the crowd trying to process what they'd just seen. Then the noise hit, a deafening mix of gasps, laughter, and disbelief. I turned to the stands and locked eyes with Sophia, who was sitting in the VIP box. Her face was a mask of shock, her hands covering her mouth. Jordan, standing on the field a few yards away, froze. His expression shifted from confusion to anger as he realized the message was about him. The aftermath of my public call-out was everything I'd expected and more. Social media exploded within minutes, clips of my celebration going viral with captions ranging from "savage" to "what just happened in Miami." The commentators were scrambling to make sense of it, and the crowd's reactions ranged from wild laughter to stunned silence. Sophia left the VIP box before the match even ended, her face pale, her phone glued to her ear. I could only imagine who she was calling. Jordan, maybe. Damage control. It didn't matter. In the locker room after the game, my teammates were buzzing with questions. Bro, what was that? Mateo asked, half laughing, half concerned. Are you okay? I just shook my head. It's personal, I said. Don't worry about it. But I could see the curiosity in their eyes, the whispers as they pieced together the story from what little they knew. When I got home that night, Sophia was waiting for me. She stood in the living room, arms crossed, her eyes red and puffy from crying. What the hell was that, Lucas? She demanded. You humiliated me in front of thousands of people. I dropped my bag by the door, staring at her. I humiliated you? I asked, my voice cold. What do you think you've been doing to me for the past 6 months? She flinched but didn't back down. We could have worked through this privately. You didn't have to make it public. I laughed bitterly. You think I wanted this to be public? You made it public the moment you started sneaking around with him. This wasn't just about me and you, it was about respect. And you lost mine a long time ago. Tears streamed down her face as she sank onto the couch, her anger crumbling into something more vulnerable. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she whispered. I don't even know how it got this far. I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms. You know what the worst part is? I would have given you everything, Sophia. I trusted you, and you threw it all away for him. She didn't reply, and for the first time in months, the silence felt final. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Sophia moved out, and we began the process of divorce. The media circus around the incident didn't die down for a while, but I kept my head down and focused on the game. Jordan Hayes, on the other hand, wasn't so lucky. His suspension became official after additional details about his behavior leaked to the press. Sponsors dropped him, and his future with the Galaxy seemed uncertain at best. For a while, the anger I carried gave me a sense of purpose, a reason to keep going. But as time passed, that anger began to fade, replaced by something quieter, relief. Relief that I'd taken control of my own story. Relief that I didn't have to live in the shadow of Sophia's lies anymore. Months later, as I stepped onto the field for another match, I felt lighter than I had in a long time. Mateo jogged up beside me, grinning. You good, man? He asked. Yeah, I said, smiling. I'm good. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it.